Did you like that? Did I subvert your expectations? Also, I'm standing because I want to show you my outfit really quick. Yeah, if you haven't noticed, I saw Carol Ann was wearing a onesie, so I decided to wear a onesie. Insert the Mean Girls scene that I'm referencing.
I saw Katie Heron wearing army pants and flip-flops, so I bought army pants and flip-flops.
Now that's a great holiday movie. Anyways, today I am bringing you a video that has been highly anticipated by me because I'm talking about one of my favorite horror movies of all time and one of the worst remakes of all time, Poltergeist. I usually do well to keep my biases at bay, but at some points in the video I might be getting just a little bit opinionated. I have lots of fun topics today. First, we'll dive into all the background information of either movie, box office numbers, genre impact, critical reception, all that fun stuff. Then we'll compare the plots of either movie. What did the remake change? Next is the character comparison, so which protagonists were you rooting for more, which villain had the most impact. Next we'll talk about the style, which includes the practical effects, cinematography, the general mise en scene. My film theory professor loved that phrase, mise en scene. Shout out to that guy though, because he's pretty much the reason why I enjoy writing all these video essays for free for all you lads. I'm just kidding, some of you guys actually do give me support on the side or during my live streams. Right now I want to shout out my patrons. I usually shout you guys out in the end of the video, but I thought that I would kick off the video just giving you guys my kisses. Mwah, 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 mwah. My patrons get kisses in every single video though, so if you would like them too, you can sign up down below. Sorry, I got sidetracked. After we talk about the styles of either movie, we will talk about the themes in each movie. What moral lessons were they trying to teach us? Are they different in the remake? And finally, we will do one big overall comparison to decide which is the superior film. I bet that you could probably take an easy guess down below in the comment section on which movie's gonna lose. Or maybe I'll surprise you. Only time will tell. Stick around. Because I'll actually be calling in a special guest at the end, yes, my father, and we will be ranking the Poltergeist franchise. So that includes the original trilogy plus the remake. There will also be timestamps linked down below if you want to just skip around. Let's kick it off with Poltergeist from 1982. It had a $10.7 million budget and went on to make $121.7 million in the box office. It was directed by Tobe Hooper and technically produced by Steven Spielberg, but he had a very heavy hand in the creativity of the project. In fact, he had such a heavy hand that some people, and even Spielberg himself, says that he basically directed the movie. I watched the Haunted House episode of Eli Roth's History of Horror. They talked about how because Spielberg was releasing E.T. in the same year and the shooting schedules somewhat overlapped, he technically was not allowed to be directing both. I think that has something to do with like the directors union. So the directing title was given to Tobe Hooper, but Spielberg himself, even in some interviews, basically just calls Poltergeist his movie, which seems kind of shady. I don't want to discredit the work that he did on Poltergeist, but it seems like he's kind of discrediting Tobe Hooper a little bit, who I think is obviously a more than competent filmmaker. You know what, to be fair, Steven Spielberg did do the story. He has a writing credit, and so I get it. Anyway, I do want to get into some of the Spielberg interviews though, because something that's funny that's worth pointing out about this movie is that it's rated PG. So I've actually been watching this movie all my life. I probably watched it for the first time around age 8. A lot of it was too scary for me growing up. I can't really believe that my dad showed it to me so young, but he also showed me Jaws when I was like 7, so. But just listen to this.
I think Poltergeist is too scary for some children. That's why the film is rated PG.
This was just fully before PG-13 even existed, so I find that really funny. And though he knew that it would be too scary for a lot of children, he did put a positive spin on it.
I didn't make the film to force American children into bed with their parents, but if it happens, it'll just bring families closer together.
That's cute. I personally slept in my parents' bed well up until about age 11, and movies like this and my crippling fear of the dark were definitely the reason. But another trend that I noticed is that anybody that interviewed him would really gas him up. They were like, "You're this 34-year-old wonder boy." And basically one of the biggest questions they would ask him all the time was just, how do you do it? And particularly when he would be talking about Poltergeist, it kind of reminded me of this year actually, when Nia DaCosta's name was kind of tossed to the side for Candyman. Because once people realized that Jordan Peele was producing Candyman, it suddenly then became Jordan Peele's Candyman. Anyway, I only watched about 3 or 4 old interviews from back in 1982 when this movie was being released released, and sure enough, it was always called his movie. It was never Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist. So I want to throw a little love out there for Tobe Hooper. I think he deserves a little bit more credit. Spielberg also references Poltergeist as, quote, his land jaws, because the terror is both unseen and relentless in either movie. He also thinks that it's not necessarily the terror that sold the tickets.
You know, I'm sitting here true to form talking about epic production value, when in fact, you know, it's the heart of the movie that sells the tickets. It's who the people are, it's how they relate to each other, and it's what the story is about.
So the success of this movie was actually probably due to its relatability. But it's also just a fantastic movie. It's very Spielbergian with the strong characters, an amazing score, and I would probably credit Tobe Hooper for the cinematography. His success was also booming at the time, so I'm not surprised that people went to go see a movie with Spielberg in the credits. And because it was one of the very first of its kind, I mean, you had the Amityville Horror that was in '79, and you had some in the '60s, but those all took place in mansions. Poltergeist was the first big budget, studio-backed, big director, big producer-backed horror movie that took place in a suburban house. I should clarify that I mean a haunted house in suburbia. Of course, you had Halloween, but that was an independent film. So obviously, Poltergeist was gonna make waves. It then spawned another 2 movies in the same decade. Of course, there wasn't any involvement by Spielberg or Hooper, so they're, you know, not great. But then one fretful day, it inspired a remake. So let's get into that now. Poltergeist from 2015. It had a budget of $35 million and went on to make $95.4 million. And it was directed by this guy, Gil Kenan. When he was interviewed about this movie, he described the project as kind of a huge burden because he himself was a movie fan and he was a big fan of the original. So he almost didn't take on the project, but then by reading the script that was provided for him, he said that that kind of washed away some of his anxieties and he didn't want anyone else to ruin it. And after this movie, he said he's not interested in doing any other remakes. He's excited about looking to the future with his next story. Also, he's a director that I've never heard of before, but I do love one of his other movies, and that would be Monster House from 2008. This is a certified animated classic. It actually scared the daylights out of me when I was a kid. I saw it in theaters. But there are actually some other pretty big names on the Poltergeist remake as well. You have Sam Raimi, who is of course famous for The Evil Dead. Also, let me know if I should do an Evil Dead comparison. I am doing all my 80s comparisons right now. You have Nicholas Braun, Sam Rockwell, Jared Harris. Those are all really big names in this movie. I mean, I guess Nicholas Braun is more like a B-list kind of a status, but I recognize him from a lot of stuff that I watched growing up. Specifically Sky High, and you'll notice that this movie comes up a lot more than you would think on this channel. Despite this seemingly very competent team who had made other great movies in the past, this movie was not received well at all. Someone you might know from YouTube, Emma from Spooky Astronaut, said that it seems like it was purely made for 3D viewers. Other critics said that it's completely unnecessary, it's painfully familiar, but this one was probably my favorite. You can do a lot worse than the new Poltergeist film, but on every conceivable level, you can do better by simply watching the original film again. So yeah, that more or less does it. I don't think I really need to go on from there, so yeah, that's the end of the video. Bye! Psych, I'm just kidding. You know I love talking. So given the critical reception and horror fans not being a fan of the movie, this movie pretty much faded into obscurity as quickly as it came. There's not really any real reason to talk about this remake unless you're a YouTuber who loves to run her mouth. So all of that out of the way, let's begin the comparison and talk about the plots. In the original, the Freelings move into a house in a newly developed neighborhood that Steve Freeling sells real estate in. Things start out whimsical with chairs moving in the kitchen, but quickly go sideways when young Carol Ann is sucked into the TV set and her brother is nearly swallowed by a tree. When the first team of paranormal investigators fails to help the family, Tangina is brought in to help the family face their demons and retrieve Carol Ann. Things seem well when the family is reunited, only for the spirits to rise up again for one last hurrah. Luckily, the family makes it out relatively unharmed, but the house gets destroyed. In the remake, the Bowens are a struggling family in which Eric was recently laid off. Things start off rocky immediately with boxes of clowns being discovered and squirrels jumping out of the walls. When the parents leave the children for a night out, young Maddie gets taken into a void in her closet. A paranormal research group sets up in the house, but their resources are not enough. TV personality Kerrigan Burke is called to help get Maddie back. Griffin decides to save Maddie himself and goes into the portal and successfully brings her out. When they try to leave the house, the spirits suck them back in for one last hurrah to no avail, but they do destroy the house. So obviously with the plots, things are extremely similar with some minor tweaks. Instead of being a high-rolling real estate agent, remake dad has been recently laid off. Instead of being a comical surprise like Tangina, the TV personality family, Burke, is set up earlier on in the movie. Instead of the mom going in to get Carol Ann, it's the brother Griffin that goes in to get Maddie. In the end, instead of the spirits attacking the kids and whatnot, the whole family gets sucked back into the house in the car. There are some major differences in style that of course we'll get into later, but the plots are remarkably similar. This is my least favorite thing that a remake does, because then what's the point of this movie's existence? Speak quickly. Here are some good examples of remakes that are different enough. You have 13 Ghosts, The Thing, House of Wax, all excellent remakes. It's not that hard, I just need a reason to want to revisit both the original and the remake. You have to make a movie that's different enough to stand on its own. Like, a lot of people today, I'm sure, don't even know that 13 Ghosts, The Thing, House of Wax, I'm sure that people don't know that those are actually remakes. Especially if you're just a casual horror fan. I'm sure that most horror fans, and you guys here on this channel probably knew that. But like with House of Wax, I can't decide which movie I liked more. I actually did do a comparison video on those two movies. That was my first video in my original versus remake series, aww. But that's how I want to feel when I see a remake of a classic movie that I love. Because I had grown up watching the 1950s version of The House of Wax. That itself is actually also a remake of a movie from the 1930s, which I didn't know. But I had grown up on that, and then I was still able to absolutely adore the remake because it was so different. It's so easy to do what they did with the Poltergeist remake, where they just regurgitate the old plot with some minor tweaks to make some quick cash, and I don't like it. Here are some random suggestions that I came up within 5 minutes just writing this video script. Follow a family of color in a different kind of neighborhood. Take me to a low-income area and show me the different obstacles that kind of a family would be presented with when trying to get help in this situation. I realize that kind of premise doesn't really work if you're trying to do the whole, oh, this house was newly built over an old cemetery. So then do something else. Just follow a different story about a different poltergeist where a family member gets taken. Maybe one of the parents gets taken, or a teenager. I would have even liked the Poltergeist remake more if it was the teenage daughter that got taken, because that presents a different dynamic. And maybe a teenager or an adult doesn't have the same kind of innocence that makes them go, oh, what's going on with the TV? Let me just get in there real quick. So make them get abducted in another way. I don't know, shake it up. The very fact that a poltergeist could somehow manage to steal a parent, I'd be more intrigued. Like, say the mom got taken, okay? Nobody would believe the husband that his wife got sucked into a TV set or something. They'd probably think she ran away and he was just trying to rationalize it. Do you see how easy that was? I don't know why it's taking studios so fucking long to realize that white suburban families are losing their marketability. We've done pretty much everything we can in terms of white suburban family being haunted. I'm tired. And I belong to a white suburban family, but you know what? I think we've had enough representation. It's worth noting though that this movie came out in the middle of the decade when white suburban family hauntings were all the rage, so it is a product of its time. But I can still be irritated. That's not against the rules. Because I cannot stress to you enough how easy it would have been to do something different with this kind of story. Whatever, we got what we got. We can move on to the characters now. You'll see a very common theme with this portion of the video. The characters in the original are good people who are worth rooting for. The people in the remake are annoying, they are horrible to one another, and I wish that they all got sucked into the ghost closet dimension. I'm just gonna lump the parent characters together because I want to talk about their dynamics really quick. In the original, they feel very real. They're smoking weed in secret in the bedroom. They're really goofy with each other. It's cute. They're really nice to the kids and just overall seem like great parents. In the remake, they're fine. No, I don't like them. They make the scene in the bedroom more of a sexual kind of moment, which also works to humanize them, but it's cringy when the kid walks in on them. As for the dads, it's really hard to beat Steve. I love Mr. Incredible, what can I say? I liked Sam Rockwell's character probably the most out of any other character of the movie. He's at least tolerable. I feel like he actually brought some good comedy to the film, and he had one of the most natural feeling performances. These goddamn bugs. Oh, I got it. Look, I got it. And bite. Ew! Oh. Ew, it's smearing on my hand. Anyways. But Sam Rockwell is just a great actor in general. Have you ever seen Moon? This is such an underrated space drama. But then at one point in the movie, his character spends a bunch of money off a credit card, just money that he doesn't have, on these really lavish gifts for his family. Which in theory is nice, but if I was his wife, I'd be pissed. Because we had already been struggling, and it's like, okay babe, great, now we're deeper in this hole. Also in that moment, his kid is trying really hard to get his attention, and he's just like completely bulldozing him and not listening to him. Also in that moment, the mom then says this.
Why doesn't anyone listen to me? Griffin, gosh, it's been all afternoon with this.
Dad, we have to move.
We're not moving. Now quit it.
Amy.
No, I expect this from Maddie, but I was trying to think that he's the baby in the family.
Mom of the year. Wow. Just wow. On that note, I guess let's talk mothers. I think I've made it clear I don't like the remake Mom, mostly because she's a mother to 3 children who obviously never really wanted to have kids.
Yeah, well, we got too many kids.
So we should have stopped it too.
Oh, and she's talking to her husband about that one time that she lost her son in a giant mall. And then you have the mom in the original, who is played by Jo Beth Williams, and I think that she is someone that a lot of people wished was their mom. In the moment where Carol Ann travels through her body, it is so deeply human.
She just moved through me. I can smell her. It's her. It is. It's my baby. She went through my soul.
It's a hard concept to wrap your mind around, and they couldn't really visualize it, but then it's sold by her performance, this really raw emotional moment. In the remake, it's nil. It's bubkiss from this mother. I'm gonna move on now, not gonna focus too much on the teenage daughters. I will say I think that they did modernize her really well for the remake. I'm also not gonna focus on Carol Ann versus Maddie because I think it's very clear who had the more convincing performance. I also feel like Maddie was too old to be getting sucked into a TV set. I don't know, I didn't buy it. I was like, why are you so dumb? I'm gonna focus just a little bit on the brother because in the original, he is definitely more of a side character. In the remake, we have Griffin, but he is actually more like the main character of this movie almost because the main arc and kind of the moral lesson we learn is followed through him. But obviously, we'll talk about that later because that was one of the only semi-interesting kind of half-baked changes they made to the movie. Also, didn't really like him as a character. So moving on to our paranormal investigators. In the original, of course, we have this initial group of paranormal investigators that come to inspect the house, which upon a rewatch is so similar to Insidious, and I don't know how I never noticed that before, but my dad and I were recently rewatching this movie and we were saying to each other, wow, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah, they definitely ripped off a lot of this movie in Insidious. There's another dimension of spirits where a child gets taken. There's the badass older woman who is the medium and she has her 2 bumbling sidekicks. It's a white family in suburbia who just moved into a new house. I mean, kind of the same story, no? What if Insidious had been the Poltergeist remake? What then? Honestly, I think that would have made for an amazing remake. I know there's all the demons and stuff like that they threw in with Insidious, but still. Sorry, let's get back to the characters. So in the original, of course, we have Tangina. I have to stress, I am not making fun of this woman's height. I just want to point out that I love the irony that such a small person has such a powerful connection to these spirits. And she's an icon. I mean, her voice, you would know it in half a second who's speaking.
You don't mind hanging back? You're jamming the frequencies.
And then in the remake, you have this hokey-ass reality TV show host, spooky-ooky boogeyman storytelling dude in a fedora. They also let it be known that he was once married to one of the other paranormal investigators, and the comedy in those scenes is revolting, to put it lightly.
We were young and stupid.
The only one of us was stupid.
Don't be so hard on yourself. I was irresistible back then.
I'm gonna go check the readings upstairs.
And she goes, just like she fled our marriage. Still misses me, though.
No, I don't.
You do, a little.
No, not even a little bit.
She forgets I can sense these things.
It's so painfully unfunny. Oh my god. It's just so obvious there wasn't enough heart and emotion in this movie to spend more time maybe with dialogue between family members. In the original, you have that scene where they're all going to sleep and one of the mediums is talking to the mom and she has the son in her lap. It's those nice family moments that kind of ease the tension and it, makes that nice kind of roller coaster ride while you're watching the movie. There's obviously nothing like that at all in the remake, no. Because they didn't have those emotions to draw from, they were kind of padding out the runtime with very unfunny, quote, comedy. And yes, having comedic relief I think is very important if your movie is actually scary. Sorry, we'll transition to style in just a second because now I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We have one more character to talk about, the villain. Well, Kylie, who's the villain? There's no villain, there's just ghosts. This guy. He still makes me so uneasy. I know that I'm a grown-ass adult, okay? I know that. Doesn't mean that this isn't one of the freakiest little fuckers I've ever seen. Plus, he does come to life at 1 or 2 points of the movie. It was said in the Cursed Films Poltergeist episode that at one point the clown actually did malfunction, so he was literally choking the child. Then in the remake, they bring back the clown, and it's fine. I can't really sit here and pretend that this isn't a freaky-looking clown. And I actually like the part where the little kid did break off his face face and you see the inner machinations of it. But also I'd rather there wasn't a clown, because there's not really much of a way to outdo the clown in the original. They did try to shake it up because, you know, he broke his face, as I mentioned, and he actually found a box of clowns, not just one clown, but it just didn't really hit. I kind of wish that they chose another inanimate object to kind of haunt them, like maybe even a doll. Maybe one of you guys could kind of verbalize for me down below why the clown didn't work for me in the remake, besides just saying that it looked stupid, because that's just, you know, it's not constructive. Maybe it's just literally because it's been done before. I don't know. So let's move on. Let's talk about style, because in the original, it 100% holds up, like everything about this movie. The hand coming out of the TV, I still think looks flawless, because you and I, we've never seen a hand come out of a TV. It could very well look like that. Stylistically, it would definitely be done differently today, but I think that that still holds up. Same with the house getting sucked into the ghost vortex. I think that it holds up so well. And it's odd because with most movies that I love that are older, I can usually pick out a couple of things where I'm like, you know, I'm still suspending my disbelief, but that doesn't look great. But with Poltergeist, literally the only one that doesn't hold up quite as well is the one where the goober helper guy is like picking his skin off his face. It goes from very regular human dude to very obvious prosthetic head, but the effect is still very gross, which is why I still like it. Like, the head doesn't really need to look real in that scene for it to still look very disgusting. Moving on though, the cinematography of this movie is also fantastic. It's very purposeful, especially in its timing. My favorite shot of the entire movie, hands down, is the one in the end where the family is rolling up super beat up to that motel. Then there's kind of a pause when they shut the door, only for Steve to then roll the TV out of the room, and then after that it slowly pans away while the credits start rolling. It's great. Such a prime example of show don't tell. There's some comedy in there. You totally get it. It also mirrors the very first shot of the movie where we open up on the national anthem playing on a static TV. That's a similar shot as well that backs up into the room with the focus being on the TV. I like that touch because it signifies that in the beginning it was just a TV, and then by the end of the movie it's this device that has irrevocably traumatized this family. Also, I can't believe that I didn't talk about this with the cinematography of the original, but in this scene right here you see that flash of the shadow of the tree, a literal foreshadow. Can we please? So the cinematography is very intimate. It's telling its own story kind of on top of what's going on screen. I've now seen the remake 2.5 times, and I didn't really pick up on anything super meaningful like that with the cinematography. The main motivation of the remake was really just to create jump scares.
Jesus, this really stuck.
Which is so lame because there are so few moments that have any actual atmosphere in the remake unless they're very in your face. And like we talked about earlier, they tried to interject comedy in this movie that just felt violently unnatural unless it was coming out of Sam Rockwell's mouth. But one of the biggest transgressions of the remake is that they actually show us the ghost dimension in all of its weird CGI wonder. I think the reason why the original works so well is because you never really see what's on the other side. You briefly do at the end, but that allows you to conjure up all these vile images of what could potentially be going on and happening to this beautiful little girl. In the remake, you're like, oh my god, you dumb little girl, stop moving and let your dumb little brother just come save you. The original had this tension of like, we have no idea what's going on over there. The unknown is terrifying. We're also then living directly in the perspective of the people who are waiting for their family members to return from this dimension. Almost as if whatever's on the other side is conceptually too much for us as audience members to handle. Our mere mortal minds are no match for the other side. You like that? You like when I get creepy? In the remake, it's just like, yeah, there it is. It doesn't look fun, but it definitely looks navigatable. Navigable. My brain fully froze there. Did you see that? Also at this point of the movie, it turns into found footage all of a sudden, which just, it feels really gimmicky to me. And don't even get me back started with the dialogue of this movie or honky donkey fedora boy. I can't reckon with that. The main point that I'm trying to make is that so much about this movie's style fell painfully flat. Yeah, they changed things up a little bit, which is important, but when you're doing that, you either have to go so far out of the box that it's completely different and something funky fresh, or There is no or. That's the only option. That's the only thing that I think that is acceptable. Because in the end with the remake, you can't tell me that them stopping to chill and look at the house while completely unscathed is more visceral than watching Jo Beth Williams slip into a muddy pool with skeletons popping up around her. They really said, we are going to make a remake that is so vanilla, and then they did it. But does that mean that it's devoid of moral lessons? Well, let's find out and dive into the theme portion of this video. In the original, I'm kind of hard-pressed to think about an overarching theme like something that the family collectively all learn together. They learn that you should do your research when you buy a house. That's an important lesson. There was somewhat of an emphasis on family values in general, like on a mother's love, also on determination to find a lost loved one. I think it's kind of just about, you know, family coming together. Maybe if we read into things a little bit deeper, you could say, oh, this is kind of an allegory for how white suburban families can move into their little houses that all look identical to one another, and everything can seem all great, but we are in fact living on the skeletons of our ancestors' violent past. Everyone kind of ignored how we got here for a very long time, but that's becoming a lot more central to our consciousness now, which is a good thing. I don't really think that was the intention, though, of the original Poltergeist. That's just kind of something we can see in retrospect. I think that ultimately Poltergeist is just another one of those movies that said, hey, bad things happen to good people. Doesn't even matter if you're a sweet, innocent little 6-year-old girl that hosts funerals for her pet bird. That's also especially eerie when you consider what happened to Heather O'Rourke just 6 years later. I highly recommend that Cursed Films episode that I mentioned earlier. They talk about the poltergeist curse from a much more grounded angle instead of how exploitative people can be when they talk about it. If you weren't aware, she was misdiagnosed with having Crohn's disease, so she was being treated for something she didn't even have. In reality, she had this congenital birth defect, so she had a bowel obstruction that burst, and she went into toxic shock and passed away at the age of 12. Her mother filed a wrongful death suit and everything because in reality she should still be alive today. Dominique Dunne was also tragically murdered by her boyfriend just shortly after the first movie's release, but we talked about that during my November wrap-up. So I just want to say I kind of appreciate the angle that they took in that Cursed Films episode. Anyways, we should get on to the themes of the remake. The most glaring one is that you gotta be there for family. You have to be there when the time comes to step up and be brave for the ones you love. They set up the brother Griffin as this real scaredy cat. Even his own mom is calling him the baby of the family. And he ends up being the one to kind of unexpectedly step up and save his sister. I say unexpectedly from the perspective of the parents because as an audience member, you could see what he was gonna do from a mile away. But the one flaw with this theme that they're trying to present is his guilt. He left Maddie on her own, which is the reason why she got sucked into the closet. That and she just seems really dense. So it seemed to me that it was more so his guilt driving him rather than him actually wanting to be brave and step up for his family. Regardless, this still kind of works because it is an important lesson and I related to it in terms of loss. Losing a family member can actually be a very slow process. Like I lost my grandma to dementia and my grandpa is now going through the same thing, and really the whole family has to rally around that member to help them pass. Love is bravery and it's facing the shit that's really hard. So I really like that theme. I just wish that it had been surrounded by a better movie, but here we are. So for an overall comparison, do I really need to do this? I've made it painfully obvious this entire video about how much I prefer the original, so yeah, absolutely. I think that if it were a standalone, the remake wouldn't be as bad of a movie to me. Given the awful dialogue and the horrible jump scares, it would probably end up being like a 3 out of 5 for me. But because the original exists and it's perfect, this is a 1-star movie for me. The original wins by a fucking landslide, who would have thought? However, we aren't done here yet. Now it's time to rank the Poltergeist franchise.
Hi there.
Father.
Kylie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dad?
It's raining down here in Southern California as I'm sitting in my office at work 550 miles away from you.
Thank you for the weather report. It is sunny with some clouds here. So I've brought you here today. You haven't been on one of my videos in a long time, but we're going to be doing our Poltergeist franchise ranking today. So going from number 4 up to number 1. I'm going to let my dad kick it off with his number 4 and of course list your reasons why.
So my number 4 is Poltergeist 3 that was set in Chicago. I thought it was kind of corny because they were doing it without the parents because they didn't have the parents for the film. And so they moved it to Chicago and say, hey, we're going to do all the same things again, but it's going to be in a tall building. I didn't hate it. It wasn't something that I would just give a 1 star. Maybe it's a 2.5 or something, but that's my definite number 4.
Oh, Absinthe is meowing. Oh my gosh. Absinthe.
Wow, must hear my voice.
He actually did come running in just now. He just misses you.
Hey, Absinthe. How's your kitty?
My number 4 was Poltergeist number 2. I'm not going to get too into it because I kind of ranted about it in my November wrap-up video, but there was just a lot that was wrong with that movie, and I thought it was such a mess, and I really actually hated the first sequel. So that's my number 4.
My number 3 is the remake in 2015.
Okay.
With Sam Rockwell. I liked it, and I said to you, if there hadn't been a Poltergeist before and somebody just watched that movie in 2015, that I thought it was a pretty good movie. I did like the Irish character that came in, the guy that had his own reality TV show and all that. I thought he added some great spice to the film. He has a really strong character, really interesting and different. You don't think so?
No, it's just funny because in my video, I just talked about the fact that I thought that he was really hokey and really goofy, but
him coming in to the movie made me like it a little bit more. I think all things considered, I did enjoy bringing in that new person.
Okay.
And that these guys had been married before. I don't know, it just added an interesting thing to you. You thought it was corny. To me, at least it made it a little bit different than the original. And I liked it better than the Chicago one, which I made a note in the Chicago one. I thought they just tried to squeeze too much of the same stuff in that movie again, but in a different city and in a different building.
okay, so that's funny because I kind of feel the opposite. My number 3 is also the remake. So my number 2 is Poltergeist 3 because I thought that what they did was really interesting. I don't think that I've ever seen a haunted house movie that took place in a skyrise. So
Yeah.
I really liked the different locations. I thought some of their use of mirror imagery and stuff was pretty cool. It was something unique that I hadn't seen before. So that's why that one makes number 2 for me.
And of course, you listen to other people's opinions and other people's opinions can sway you. I didn't have super strong opinions about these. The original's the best in almost every case. I had the one you can't stand as number 2. I had Poltergeist 2, The Other Side in 1986, where they're in a new location at the grandma's house and they bring in the Native American character, which I think you thought was corny, but I thought was kind of interesting because I've always been curious about the spirituality of Native Americans and their whole thing is interesting to me. So for me, I liked that, but I also thought it was nice to have more of the same characters in the second one. That's probably why I put it number 2. So it was still held together more.
Yeah, I understand that because I love the family from the original. And so for me to see the characters that we love have to go through some of the stuff that they did. There's one particularly really disturbing scene between Craig Jones and JoBeth Williams that
Craig T. Nelson.
Craig T. Nelson. What did I say?
Craig Jones.
Who's Craig Jones?
This is cousin.
2 cousins, both named Craig with different last names.
Nice.
So of course we agree that the original is the best, which I feel like in this case it's earned. I don't think there was really a way to follow up a perfect movie. I don't know, but what did you rate the original? I can't remember.
I'm gonna guess I gave it a 4 or a 4.5. I really liked that movie, but as we were saying the live stream the other day, it's not one of my top movies. I do like it for movies out of that time period, and I do like it because I don't feel like there were a lot of mainstream horror type movies during that time period. So it was kind of special in that regard with a very famous director and all of that. So I'm still trying to figure out this whole rating system. One's rewatchable. I'm not interested in rewatching any of those other ones again.
I don't think that I would either, honestly. Really, the original is the only one that I care to rewatch. As far as ratings go, you kind of just gotta go with your gut. You just go with whatever feels good.
5's going to be one of my favorite movies ever. That's the ones that are going to hit 5s for me. And we're just doing these on our own opinions anyway. It's our favorites. We're ranking them. We're not ranking them completely just on how great of a movie it is and the technical aspects and all of that. It's a combination of everything with our opinion being the end of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there you have it. I mean, there is our ranking of the Poltergeist franchise. Thank you so much to my dad for joining me today. So hope you enjoyed that. Let's get to my outro. So there you have it, mine and my father's ranking of this franchise. If you like my dad, then fret not, we've done many live streams together. We do them every Saturday. Hopefully we can figure out how to keep that up once I go back down to LA. To conclude, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Of course, give me your Poltergeist ranking down below, or tell me if you just prefer the original or remake. So I guess all that's left to say is, tschüss, arrivederci, 再见, bye.